Hello everyone, my name is Dan, and welcome to the next episode in Getting Started with MonoGame series. Okay, so last time we left off with just getting our splash screen, but there was really no way we could transition to this neatly, at least. So like in game one here, you can see we have this ice screen here, which keeps a reference to our current screen. What happens within the game if we want to transition to another screen? Say we have the splash screen, and then obviously what comes next is the menu. Then you have a bunch of things happening in there, and then you have the typical game screen. So we want a way to kind of transition between all these without having to just kind of set this every time. So we could set this every time like this, so screen equals new sum screen, if it existed, right? That'd be possible, but where's that going to happen? So one thing we could do is we could use callbacks. So we could have something in screen that says, "Hey, I'm finished. I'm ready for you to go to the next screen," and that's quite a good way to do it. So for instance, say we had a method here called screen change, right? And then we had something in screen, such as an event, that could call this method for us. We could then change the screen from here, from this method exactly, rather than having to, I guess, ask screen, are you done? So let's go through a terrible design right now. Let's say we've got a public bool called finished. Now, screen could update this boolean when it's finished, and then game one could be asking, so if screen is finished, if that existed, sorry, let's add it to the interface really quickly. Okay, so it could go if screen finished, do some screen change here. Let's add a comment. Then you'd have to obviously update what screen is, so you do screen equals whatever the screen is, and then you do this every time. The problem with this is obviously this class is going to become immensely long if we start adding crazy logic like that. So we probably don't want to do that. So let's think of a different solution. Now let's get rid of all this stuff I've just added. Splash screen. Remove this boolean. We won't be needing that just yet. Oops. There we go. And let's think about what we'll need. Okay, so we could add some kind of service or some kind of control that can keep track of all of our screens, and then we can just go ahead and update that. That can be responsible for changing screens, and then we don't have to have any of that logic within this game class. So let's do that. Let's make a new folder. Call it... this is a terrible word, but I'm going to use it. Managers. Why is it terrible? Well, managers indicate that they're going to have a lot of responsibility, which isn't always the best for classes, but it happens a lot in game design. So let's roll with it for now. So let's make a manager. What do we want this manager to do? We want a manager that can control our screens for us. So let's just go for the obvious name for this class and call it Screen Manager. Just like that. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to make this public for now and remove all these using statements at the top. Okay, so now we have a Screen Manager. Now our goal is to remove the screen completely from game one. We don't really want to have a reference to the screen here. So let's just remove this line and fix up everything in here that's going crazy now. So we've got a call to screen to update. We've got this happening here. We can remove that as well. So we're creating a screen here. Let's remove that line. We're also drawing a screen. So none of these lines want to exist in this class, but they want to exist somewhere in Screen Manager. That's my coffee machine. All right. So let's go to update again in game one, and let's add Actually, let's go from the top. Let's start at the top of game 1 and add a reference to a screen manager. So let's make a screen manager, call it screen manager. It can be private. I'm going to try my best to keep most references private in this. So we've got a reference to a screen manager, and we want to make an instance of this now. So say in initialize, we can do screen manager equals new screen manager. And now that's creating a new instance of this class we've yet to implement. But that's what we need. So back in game 1. And what kind of stuff is the screen manager going to need? Well, we're going to need some way to set the screen. So we could go ahead and do that. Or we can go for the obvious route first. So the screen manager is going to want to update the current screen. So within the update method, let's just call that screen manager dot update. Doesn't exist just yet, and it's still going to need a reference to the delta, so pass in delta as well. Yeah, this red squiggly, we'll deal with that in a second. We just want to call this, and we'll add it in a second. And it's also going to want to draw the current screen, so let's go ahead and do that as well. So screen manager dot draw and pass in sprite batch. So underscore sprite batch. So those are the two methods we know we're going to need on this. So let's implement them. If you go on update and alt enter, you can press generate method here and it'll actually add that to the screen manager for you. And the same with draw, alt enter on that and generate the method. And then we can go ahead and implement both of those. So back in screen manager, you can see we've got these two methods made. Remove these throws, we don't need any of that. And that should be okay for now. What exactly is update and draw going to do? It's going to, well, update is going to update a screen, particularly the active screen. So there may be multiple screens that the screen manager has reference to. We only really wanted to update the current screen because you don't want, obviously if you go from the main menu, from the main game back to the main menu, you don't want the game loop running while you're in the main menu. That would be nasty. So basically, yeah, if we've got an active screen, we want to update that. So let's sort that out. Let's add a reference to a screen. So private iScreen active screen like this. So now we've got a reference to some form of screen. It hasn't been set just yet, but let's pretend that it will get set magically eventually. In update now, we can actually call ActiveScreen.update and pass in that delta again. Same for draw. You can do ActiveScreen.draw and pass in sprite batch. So now all we've really done in this episode so far is move the logic from game 1 and put it all into something that should probably be dealing with this kind of screen drawing and screen management. Now, how are we going to set this active screen? One way, you could have a constructor that takes, how do I do this? There you go. That takes a screen, and then you can just set active screen to screen here. The problem with this is, yeah, this is public. This needs to be public. Sorry. Yeah, so this is fine. But what happens when we want to change screens? We're stuck with this same screen. So let's get rid of this. We don't want this. We want some way to set this and then potentially set it again. So let's make a method called public void set screen that takes an iScreen, and there we go. So now we can use this method to set this. So active screen equals screen. Let's just say this is okay for now. Okay, so let's remove this using statement because we're not using it, and keep all this fine. I'm going to make all these public for the sake of this tutorial. Alright, so let's go back to game 1. And now, in initialize, well, after this actually, in load content, the best place to do it, we can use our screen manager here. And we can do set screen. And the default screen, the initial screen, is going to be a new splash screen. And we're going to pass in that splash image like we did earlier, so it's just splash image with an underscore. Now we don't actually need to keep a reference to this, so let's just remove this underscore and call it here. Make the local variable here within the method. and we can remove the reference up here. We don't need to keep it around here. We never expect game 1 to ever be drawing anything, so there's no point. And it's the same also for the sound effect, so let's just make that local there as well, and remove it from up here. This is looking a lot better already. So we've got just a few things that game 1 deals with. It's got the graphics device manager, standard MonoGame stuff, sprite batch, standard MonoGame stuff, and then our own screen manager, and a bunch of content stuff. So at this point, once this is red's gone, we can probably just ignore this class completely now and never come back here. We've got all the responsibility that we need in screen manager, and we don't have to worry about this thing. So let's run that and see what happens. There we go. It's exactly the same as we left it last tutorial. Let's close it again. There are other problems again. So say we set this to null. This may not be too much of a problem, but it might happen somewhere in the game. Something crazy might happen with your logic, and we don't want this kind of stuff to happen. So let's say you're setting screen to null, run it again. And now we're going to get some errors, right? Yeah, so active screen doesn't exist, and active screen draw doesn't exist. So let's set that back. Easiest way to do this is just to deal with it as you are and just put a question mark here. That means, hey, if it's not null, do this. There we go. So now it won't throw. If active screen happens to be null, which it will be at the beginning, if we never set screen, then it'll just go on its merry way and it won't do this update call, which is great. Right. What else can we add? Okay. So let's now deal with what happens when we want to transition between screens. So one thing we can do is add a reference to a second screen, basically one that holds the next screen, so you know if say for instance your game screen wants to go back to the menu screen, it would yell out and say, hey, I want to go back to the menu screen please, and then your screen manager will pick that up and it'll say, hey, okay, cool, I'll just keep a note of that and I'll update it as soon as I can. We don't want the screen manager to just drop everything the game is doing just like that, because there might be stuff it needs to do. It might need to clean stuff up, it might need to do anything. So let's not have the screen manager to just drop the screen straight away. Let's just change how this is going to work. So instead of setting the active screen, let's create another one of these variables and call it next screen. Now, when you call set screen, we'll set next screen equals to screen. At this point, we have a reference to whatever wants to be next, so the splash screen in this case, but no way to transition to it. So let's add another method, public void switch to next screen. This will just make sure the next screen is not null. So if next screen is not equal to null, active screen equals next screen, and then let's set next screen to null here, because we don't want, once we've switched to the next screen, we don't want to keep next screen as the active screen as well, otherwise we may have some issues or some weird things happening with transitions. So let's avoid that here. Okay, so now let's go and fix up game 1. So in load content, we are setting the screen to a new splash screen, which sets the next screen, and screen manager dot switch next screen. There we go. So now it's going to say, hey screen manager, I want you to make sure that at some point, please just make sure that you're keeping a track of this splash screen here. And then this just says, hey, yeah, I want to switch to that next screen. So it'll work exactly the same way, hopefully, unless I've made some silly mistake. There we go. Alright, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.